Today, I really wanted to focus in on the Japanese tea world, and since I live in Japan, I have easy access to a lot of different types of teas. So, from left to right here, we've kind of got some more common teas, and then on the right, we kind of have some harder to find teas, at least in Japan. So, one thing about Japanese tea in general is most of the tea is steamed in Japan. Um, I would say probably like 99% of the tea in Japan is probably steamed, and 1%, uh, or maybe even less, I don't know the exact number, but it's something around there, is pan fried, um, or not pan fried at all. And that's what this is. This is a white tea. We'll get to that later. But basically, this is an example sencha. It's got the characteristic, um, really fine processing of the leaves. When the tea leaves are steamed, and then you dry them out and you roll them out and you get all the moisture out, what's left is just these really fine needle-like leaves um, from that process. Unlike when you pan fry leaves, like it's traditionally done the Chinese way of processing tea, that kind of maintains the shape of the leaves a bit more. So that's what this one is over here. You can see that the leaves are definitely bigger, and they kind of have maintained. I'm actually just gonna pick some of these out in the cup here, hopefully get a better view. Um, you can see that they maintain, you can see that they're actual leaves, right? If you were looking at sencha and you didn't know what you're looking at, you could tell it's some sort of plant, but I don't know, is it a leaf? It's kind of hard to tell, right? Um, but with these, you can definitely tell that they've got some of that maintained leaf shape, and that is the characteristic pan-fried leaves. So anyway, so this is a sencha, right? Most senchas in Japan are going to look like this. And it's not just sencha that looks like this, is also gyokuro, kind of looks the same, kabusecha looks the same. I'm going to pull up a flowchart later in this video, a pretty nice flowchart made by Tezumi that shows the different tea types. But a lot of green tea in Japan has this kind of look, fine leaves like that. And then this is a Houjicha. So Houjicha is usually a byproduct of sort of the less desirable leaves in the tea processing world. So, the tea that doesn't make a good gyokuro, or that they're not the top leaves of the plant. It's like these tend to be like the bottom leaves, the stems of the tea more so, the tea plant. That's what ends up becoming Houjicha, and you can already tell that the leaves are kind of more, there's bigger pieces in there, and that's just a product of, instead of being the smaller buds and younger leaves, they're usually taking Houjicha from the later harvests in the year, the third or fourth flush, and then B, also lower on the bush where the leaves are bigger. You can also see there's more stems in this too. Occasionally you'll see a stem or two in the sencha. You can see one. Looks like right about there's a stem, but for the most part, it's mostly leaves. But Houjicha, it depends on who's making it, but there tends to be more stems in Houjicha, again, because it's sort of like a way for them to use parts of the tea plant that wouldn't otherwise be usable in other teas that they're selling. So there's more stems in here. And you'll find some Houjichas that are just almost completely all stems. And me personally, I like Houjicha that's more leaves. I don't really like the flavor that stems give when they're brewed hot. Stems are great when they're brewed cold, but for hot teas, and usually you like to brew Houjicha kind of hot, I just don't really like the flavor it gives off. It's sort of a more, I don't know, hay type of flavor typically, and it's not for me that much. So this is a Houjicha that I like because it doesn't have that many stems in it, and it's kind of hard to find Houjichas that are mostly leaves sometimes. Now, this type of tea, again, you can already see probably there's a lot of stems in here, and this is karigane. So I've showed karigane in a previous video, and some people might be used to hearing the term kukicha for stem tea, and the difference is basically, and again, you'll see this in the flowchart that I show later, but karigane is stem tea that's made from shaded tea. So shaded tea would be Gyokuro or Kabusecha, and sometimes high-grade Senchas, they shade for some amount of days too. And so that tends to give the tea a more robust umami and sweeter flavors. So that also happens to the stems too. So Karigane is like a more higher grade, better tasting. Of course, that's subjective, but better tasting. That's how it's marketed anyway. Stem tea, and you can see that here they actually do mix it with some leaves too. And that's another thing I found with Karigane is even though it's just called stem tea, a lot of the times I do see that it's mixed with leaves, probably because especially since it's supposed to be kind of like a higher class product, they try to give it a little bit of boost of flavor with some of the shaded leaves too. But usually if you buy Houjicha, since that is made from unshaded tea production, for whatever reason, I don't usually see Houjicha mixed with tea leaves. It's usually just stems. Some people love Houjicha. Like I said, I think Houjicha makes a great cold brew. I don't really like it brewed hot personally, so that's just my taste. So then, I talked about this one a little bit, and I wish I had a better container for this. It's kind of hard to see in there, but this is a Kamairicha, but it's an oolong. So it is pan-fried like they would typically do in China. I mean, this is a Japanese tea. It's made in Yame, but it's also been oxidized slightly to put it on the oolong spectrum. I'm actually going to get the container of this tea out so I can just show you directly. This is one of my favorite oolongs I've had in Japan. Obviously, as I mentioned, Kamairicha in general is rare, and then, if Kamairicha is 1% of the tea, and then, some Kamairicha just stays as green tea, then it's even less that gets made into oolong. So it's kind of hard to find oolong teas made in Japan, real oolong tea anyway. You can see these leaves are really pretty. You can tell that it's lightly oxidized just because there's a lot of green color still in there. This tea is just, it's amazing. I mean, some people think that, only Taiwan and only China can make good oolong tea. There is great oolong tea in Japan. You just really have to search for it. It's kind of hard to find. This is an example of one of those great teas. It's made in Yame, and Yame is known for having like a sweeter tea taste. And when they make an oolong with that Yame, that sweet Yame tea, it just creates a really good balance, of roasty, honey, sweet flavors. If you get a chance, keep your eye out for Hoshino blue tea. So finally here, just to kind of end off with some of the teas that are harder to find, this is a white tea, and it took me the longest time to find a real good quality white tea in Japan. This comes from a tea farm that's on the border of Ureshino City and Nagasaki Prefecture, this Sonogi tea factory. They have some pretty high quality teas. I pay a pretty price for it too, but I think it's worth it. So anyway, white tea is not pan fried and it's not steamed. All they do is they wither it in the sun, or they dry it in some way, and heat is not added. So when you pan fry the tea or you steam it, you're adding heat so that you kill the enzymes, which effectively locks the tea into being green tea, or then you can oxidize it after that. Whereas white tea, because it's not pan fried, it's not steamed, you didn't kill the enzymes in the tea, you can get a tea that oxidizes as you age it. So basically it can start out as more like a really fresh tasting green tea. I mean, it has its own taste profile because it's not, the enzymes haven't been killed, but as it ages, it kind of becomes more like a robust, stronger black tea type of flavor because it's oxidizing over time. So you can age white tea for, a couple years and it starts to get a little bit oxidized, or some people age it for like 10 to 15 years and then it's fully oxidized almost at that point and it has a completely different taste profile. But anyway, you can see that these leaves are really immaculate. They're in like perfect condition. There's almost no broken leaves in this batch of leaves here. The taste is pretty light, right? I mean, I think if you've ever had white tea, you know that it's pretty subtle, light honey notes, and of course this is no different. Um, Similar to Chinese white tea, just made with Japanese varietal. So this one actually is comes from a tea varietal called Misho. But one thing I would watch out for when you're buying tea, not in Japan especially, is people selling sencha as whatever random crap they buy from Japan. I've been to a couple tea houses. There was one in Halifax, Canada, actually. I was pretty surprised that was selling what they called was sencha, but it was clearly bancha. So bancha is it's kind of more like these types of leaves. Bancha is like as I was explaining when I talked about this Houjicha, it's the bottom of the bush. It tends to be, lower quality. It's cheaper. It has less flavor. That's why bancha is usually either made into Houjicha or it's also made into genmaicha, because the toasted rice adds the flavor that the leaves don't inherently have. I will say, sometimes if you find a really good quality sencha, it'll have a lot of these like needles in it. So it's kind of a subtle difference, and it's hard to describe when I'm just on this little camera. But if you see a tea that's like all like these types of leaves, that's good. That's probably good quality. Like all these thin needles. This kind of chopped up pieces, it's okay. It's kind of like normal, typical sencha. But this is really what you want is like these full needle leaves. And if you get a batch that's all this, it's probably a good quality sencha. If it's got this like thin, more dried out looking, frail pieces that are kind of chunked up like this is like the classic bancha look. So that's what you would look out for quality. So just wanted to make a quick little update. I realized that sencha I showed in the last video probably wasn't the best example. I realized there was a lot more like tea bits and pieces in there than actual tea leaves as I was reviewing the footage. So I took out this Kabusecha from Yame, and as I mentioned, Kabusecha is shaded, less than Gyokuro would be, but Kabusecha and Gyokuro and sencha probably for the most part kind of look the same. Maybe Gyokuro's a bit deeper in color, so maybe Kabusecha is also a bit deeper in color, but for the most part, if you get a good quality sencha, it should look mostly like this looks here, where the body of the tea leaves that are here are mostly like these needle-shaped leaves, right? There's a couple, bits and pieces of little tiny leaves here and there, but for the most part, it's these, thinner, narrow-shaped leaves that make up the most of what's here. So, yeah, hope that helps.